Hey guys, welcome to the Adventure Photo Show. This is the Friday night live stream where I am chatting about photography and adventure and answering your questions about photography and adventure. And the whole point of this channel is to help you enjoy photography and have fun while telling your story with a camera. And so if that's something you're interested in, make sure to join us every Friday night, 8 p.m. or so Eastern Time. My 3-year-old daughter willing, I do these live streams and connect with you guys and bring a topic that I chat a little bit about for the opening 20 to 30 minutes or so, a little bit of a monologue, and then once we get a little further into it, then I start doing a little bit of Q&A. So for those of you who are joining, I will, probably interact with you a little bit less here in the first part of this live stream, and then kind of once we get past that opening 30 minutes, and I'll kind of take some questions and go from there. So for those of you who may not know me, who do not attend these live streams on a regular basis, my name is Steve Riker. I'm an adventure photographer and filmmaker, a climber, type 1 diabetic, and a nurse. So I have a lot of different things that I'm interested in and that have influenced my photography. And what I really am motivated by, honestly, is being able to document where I go and what I do and the people and places around me. I consider myself more of a documentary style. That's the way that I like to shoot. And I think there's a certain amount of utilitarianism and just general practicality that I try to capture in my work, and that's what I try to bring to everyone else here. And on this channel, certainly I do talk a fair share about gear, and tonight I am going to dig into a little bit of the gear. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Fuji X100F and XE3, and hopefully I won't mix those names up too badly, because a lot of alphabet soup going on here. And I am going to talk a little bit about the X100T as well. Now, to kick things off, I have to admit that I am no longer in possession of the Fuji X100F. I have actually sold it. It has gone to a very good home, and I actually wound up becoming friends with the gentleman who bought my camera for his daughter for Christmas, so that was an unexpected blessing that kind of came along there. And so now my Fuji kit is down to one camera, the XE3. That is the camera that I am shooting with strictly. And so last week, for the photo challenge, I announced that we're going to kind of get back into some of the living vertical photo challenges, where you just share your work on Twitter or Instagram with the hashtag #LVPhotoChallenge. And what I wanted to do for this fourth iteration of that photo challenge was to have us focus on printing our work. Because this time of the year, I feel like with gift giving, a lot of people of us who are photographers, we're out there making work all year long, and this is a nice excuse to be able to print our stuff and give it to somebody else. And for some of us, it might just be, a cheap way to give a gift to a family member or a loved one who means a lot to us, but we just don't know what else to get them. We want to get them something that has a little bit of sentimental value, that expresses appreciation and significance, but something that isn't, strictly material in nature. And so, naturally, a photograph is a really great thing. And so, also, there's also a lot of really great sales that go on at this time of the year. Different publishing and publishing houses and print shops, they do a lot with sales at this time, because they know that there's going to be a lot of folks, getting prints made. And so, I thought it'd be a really good time to kind of encourage everybody to print. And I really don't know how many people actually print. I feel like these days I try to stress the importance of printing more and more, because everything being digital, it lacks a certain something special. I think that to a large extent, that in order to finish an image properly, it's finished once it's on paper, once it's in the physical world. And I have really enjoyed the process of getting my work printed, and I'm still fairly a neophyte in the whole world of printing. And so I'm looking forward to exploring this process a little bit myself, and I've done some printing, here and there, but I still, again, I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I know what looks good, and I know what makes me happy and is pleasing to my eye. And so one of the things that I wound up doing when I was trying to select these prints for the photo challenge, and I kind of lost track there. I was going to tell you the photo challenge is number 4, as I mentioned last week in the live stream, is just to print a handful of photos that are significant to you or that you really like from this past year, and make them available, take pictures of them, and share a little bit of your process and why you selected them and how you printed it and how it makes you feel, honestly, just to get a little bit of that, and then share that with the LV Photo Challenge hashtag, and that's what I'm going to be doing here as well. And as it turned out, despite the fact that some of my favorite images this year were taken with the X100T and the 100F, I relinquished both of those cameras, which served me very well. So it wasn't for a lack of good quality or good image quality, as I'm going to show you here with some of the prints behind me that I got done with the X100T, which is the one behind me here, and I'll show you that in better detail in a second. And then the X100F is over my other shoulder, and that was taken in Canada in Banff National Park, and that's one of my favorite images I think that I've taken in a long time. And it just really, when you get your work printed and you actually have a chance to see it for the first time, it's very special and it's very different. And I really found that to be very encouraging and very enjoyable, because I spend a lot of time manipulating images, or editing, let's say, not really manipulating. I don't do super heavy edits, but I spend a lot of time polishing and tuning up my images. And then a lot of times after maybe you post them on Instagram, a handful of people double tap it, then you don't really interact with that image for who knows how long. It can be a really long time before you interact with it again, and printing it puts it in a physical space where you can interact with it regularly. And one of the things that I wanted to do also was just to really test out the quality, the image quality, because again, blowing stuff up on a screen is one way to test image quality, but to me the real final test is when you make a print with the camera to see what quality it comes out at. And so that's kind of where I want to start. And most of the images that I have, I got a handful of 15 by 10 images, and I got this one here with the X100F, that's a 20 by 30, and then the other one behind me is a 20 by 28, and I'm going to frame that one, and I'm still waiting on frames for a couple of the images that I took. And guys, good evening to all of you who are in the chat here that are checking in. Just forgive me, I'm going to kind of move on with the monologue a little bit, and then I'm going to chat with you guys here for that's what I get for wanting to be a little more organized in my structure. My pictures attack me because I balance them poorly. I should be surprised that happened, but okay, hopefully we're good there. Yes, so yeah, this is full value here. I should certainly gain a couple more subscribers and a little bit more credibility for having been attacked by that picture. Yeah, it was a hell of a time trying to position it so that the light would not glare off of it, and that's what I get for my efforts. But yeah, some of these images are a little bit oddly sized, and I want to show you each of them in detail, tell you a little bit about the process that I use. The majority of the images, though, that I printed were from the X100F, and I didn't do that on purpose because of the fact that I was going to be getting rid of it. Not an homage by any stretch, but I wanted to look at it. And actually, I kind of forgot about this, but I actually have a handful of images too that were shot with the GH5, and I didn't put that in the title. Maybe I'll add that back afterwards, but it's kind of interesting because I have a pretty decent cross-section of the cameras that I've shot with over the last 9 to 12 months, which is the Panasonic GH5, which everybody who loves Fuji thinks Micro Four Thirds suck, and I disagree with that because according to these prints here, they're just beautiful quality. And then, there's the X100T, the X100F, and the XE3. And the bottom line that I want to just say with all of this is that, number one, all of these cameras make beautiful images and beautiful prints. The largest print that I have here is the 20 by 30, and that was in no way stretched to its capacity. I mean, could have easily printed much bigger, I believe. And if my budget would have allowed, I certainly would have gone bigger, but I wanted to get a variety of prints done. I didn't want to just do one super big print. I wanted to do one pretty big print, and you know, figured I would go from there in terms of adding in some smaller prints. And honestly, printing is not cheap. It is not cheap, and so especially if you get good quality prints done. Now, the first thing I want to say is that I used a company called Whitewall Lab, or Whitewall Labs. I forget whether it's singular or plural. I can tell you that I do not have any sort of affiliation with them other than the fact that they liked my tweet when I said I'm going to be formally switching all of my printing needs to Whitewall from this point forward, because they are economical, and their print quality, their options, everything that they offer, it is absolutely top shelf in terms of quality. And you can get any kind of paper, coatings, finishings, framings, canvases, acrylic, you know, kind of inlays. There's all these amazing things that they do, and they do it definitely top shelf. Up till this point, I've been using Society 6 to print and sell my work. And Society 6 is nice because they actually do sell prints, and Society 6 has really good print quality as well. I've never had any complaints about their stuff. I've always liked it. It's just that Whitewall gives you a cut above, gives you more options and different kinds of paper that you can use. And I feel like the cost is a little bit more. It's geared towards photographers. It's made for photographers, where Society 6, they make posters, and it's geared more towards, you know, artists who just want to have a, you know, a simple product that they can turn over and at a good quality. But if you really want to fine tune the coatings and how and the paper that you're using, and I've only started to dabble with that. There's so much that you could do, and of course the price varies based on what paper you use. And honestly, I use pretty much the bottom of the barrel in terms of the cheapest stuff and the least bells and whistles. And it still was really, it just blew me away. It just absolutely blew me away. And I've been very impressed with that. Society 6 is good as well. Again, I don't knock their quality, but it's just, to me, if you want to go a little bit further in terms of the things that you can fine tune, I think that Whitewall Labs are really outstanding. Just beautiful stuff. And I have no affiliation with them, again, if you wind up using them, and I will link them below. I think that if you haven't, and if you'll excuse me here, I'm getting ready to just kind of dig into the comments a little bit on my laptop, because it's easier than trying to do all of that stuff on the phone. So that this way I can see the chats. We can do this pop out chat, and boom, there we go. Sweet. Okay. So yeah, let me show you these prints a little bit here, and hopefully I can do this in a way that actually works halfway decent. This again, as a 16. As a 20 by 30. I don't know how well you can see, and what I want to do is I want to kind of do my best. Those of you who saw the image of my little studio space on Instagram, you know, it's pretty hard to see how cramped it is in here, but it's tight. So I want to kind of I'm going to give you a little panning shot of this, but just to kind of get like some real close-up detail there in the photo that you can see. And of course there's my pal Martin right there. He's the subject of the photo, and this is super close up. And again, if we put the rechamber the photo, that was taken with the X100F, which again is not highly reputed or regarded as a landscape camera. And Scott, just for the record, I absolutely am in the closet. I've just done a little bit of aesthetics, and that's why it is so infernally tight in here. Just put up a little bit of stuff in the background, and if you look back here, you can see that I am in fact in the closet, because I am with my family in Massachusetts. But I'm glad that I was able to convince you that I was not in the closet with my decorating. So that means my decor is at least successful. That's worth something. And let me try to turn this to hide the glare just a little bit. But yeah, I was just blown away with the amount of detail that's in the photo. I mean, you can see little rocks that are like little pieces of scree that are thousands of yards away at the bottom of this gully here. And it's one of my favorite photos. And honestly, I was tempted to go bigger, but I wanted to have a little bit more money left over for some of my other photographs because I couldn't just narrow it down to just 2 or 3, so I printed a whole bunch. And I'm going to continue printing more because, you know, I feel like this stuff is worth it. You know, there's really no point in taking photographs only to put them on social media. Certainly, there are some photographs that are only, you know, they've reached their end of their life cycle once they're done with social media. But I think that for the photos that really mean more to us, that we really go that extra mile to get, and that cost us something to get, I think it makes it valuable to actually go and finish that process. Now, again, some of you may take issue with my style at presenting this because this is not, I don't think, a industry standard. But again, I'm still kind of learning with the whole prints thing, so I don't know how one is technically supposed to handle this stuff. But this is another image of mine that is one of my absolute favorites. And this is a photo that I took with the X100T, and I took this when I was fishing with my daughter this past summer. My dad actually took this photo. It's a little bit darker, and it's on a matte finish, so because it's black and white, you can't see the detail. And I think it's really more the editing than anything else. The detail isn't quite as sharp as it could be, but at the same time, you know, there's still, you can still see plenty of detail in there, and it's beautiful black and white shot. And of course, for obvious reasons, this is a very important photo for me. But this is with the X100T, which of course is a much, you know, it's a 16 megapixel sensor. And I guess I wanted to show that not only because of the fact that I love this picture of my daughter and myself, but just because of the fact that, you know, you could easily go larger with this this print, and it's 16 megapixels. And so that's one of the things that I know has been discussed a little bit between the X100T and the X100F. And, you know, the 24 megapixel sensor is certainly a nice thing to have, but I don't feel in any way that the, you know, the 16 megapixel sensor, I still feel like the X100T is a really, really fantastic buy at this point, given the fact of how well that prints, and also the fact that the price is coming down on it. So I'm going to show you a couple more of the smaller prints that I got made, and I think these will translate a little bit better. And I'll tell you a little bit about each one of them, what kind of the story is behind them. And I will do this as best I can. This is my friend Martin's dad. Now, you may remember Martin, he made a video with me where we were talking about kind of his approach to photography. He is a Lumix shooter, and he's the guy that buys a new camera every 10 years or so. And I shot this with the Fuji X100F. I don't think I'm going to frame these. I like these just as large photographs. And we shot this in his kitchen, in Martin's kitchen, with his dad. And his dad is a fantastic photographer as well. His name is Hans. And he came to Switzerland back in the 1930s to be a ski guide in British Columbia. And he is an incredible man. He is almost 90 years old, and he still climbs, he still hikes. He has put up incredible first ascents, doing like exploratory climbing, which is the hardest, scariest, most dangerous type of climbing you can do. Back in the day, before there was all like the super light gear that was, you know, very geared towards people being able to do light and fast type of climbing, he was doing light and fast with heavy and clumsy gear. and he's still getting after it even at 90 years old. And he's an amazing photographer, and he's been shooting out in the mountains. He's just basically lived the majority of his adult life in the mountains. He's just a mountain guy, and still just totally, I love this photo because it captures. He's always joking. He's like a little kid at 90 years old, always pulling your leg, always got a funny story and an encouraging word to share. I have a actual video, set of videos that I did, and that I'm still in the process of editing, that I'm going to show you guys hopefully before too long. One of many documentary projects, film projects, or video projects, I should say, that I am going to do. And his life, he's beaten cancer as well, and he's still healthier than most people, half his age. And it's just mind-blowing. One of the most inspiring and nicest people. And obviously you saw the video, hopefully, with Martin. We're talking, he's my partner actually, for the adventure up into the mountain. Martin is this guy. This is Martin. His dad, you can see that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. They're just like, cut from the same cloth, and just literally some of the best people, if not the best people I've ever met. Because I don't want to preclude the possibility that there are other really amazing people that I might be in contact with that are, equally so, because I love all of you guys that come on these live streams, of course. But of the people that I've met in person and interacted with, like, when I hear about all the bad stuff that's going on in the world, I think to myself, if there were more people like Martin and his dad, I think, and his mom, like, these are just literally the nicest people that, like, nobody could take any fault with. These people are just, yeah, I'm pretty impressed with them. I named my daughter after his mom. So yeah, these people have been a big influence on my life, and I'm always being able to capture that spirit and that vibrance at his age is something that, it's like, when you meet somebody that has that much energy, it's almost like a challenge where, okay, it's almost the same thing as like when I look and see a sunset that's really beautiful, and it's like, I have to get this before it fades. And you just shoot it and hope that you can capture an element of that thing that you felt in that moment. And obviously I have a lot of strong feelings towards Martin and his family, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to print that photo. And also just because, the camera makes good pictures. So this next one is from the XE3. This is a waterfall, and I'm going to do a video all about this. But this is a waterfall, and I'll show you a little bit closer up. This is on matte paper. I shot this with the Fuji XE3 and the 23mm f2 lens. This was, I want to say, a 30-second exposure at ISO 400 at f8, because I wanted to stop it down and get nice sharp crispness. And this is the only one of my images that I shot or that I got printed on matte paper. And like I said, I'm going to do a video about this just from this night that I went out and shot. It was 23 degrees, and I was standing under a bridge at this waterfall that I was a little bit worried the cops were going to come and chase me off. These days, post 9/11 and everything, they're not super psyched on, just random people doing unknown things under bridges. So I was a little bit concerned. I actually went out to a different waterfall in the same river, but found that it was posted, so I couldn't get in there, couldn't shoot. And I was like, oh man, I was really bummed, because I wanted to test out the XE3 specifically for night shooting with a variety of different lenses, and that's what that video is gonna cover. Just a few different shots with a few different lenses here at this waterfall. But this waterfall is on the Walk Hill River in New York State, upstate New York, and I did not use any filters on this. This was just straight out of the camera, basically, with a little bit of black and white, just fixing the black and white stuff, adding a little bit of contrast, a little bit of sharpening, but not too much else went into this. I don't usually use it. The only filters that I usually use, and this is less of an artistic decision and more of just kind of my level of expertise and what I'm comfortable with, but I typically will only use neutral density filters. I don't like to use any kind of color filters or anything else. You know, and most of the time I found that I can fix the colors that I need to in post, or as it turned out with this particular image, you know, the colors, there are some color versions of this photo that you'll see in my video when I get that up, hopefully next week. The colors were a little bit squirrely because it was at night and there was all different kinds of fluorescent and halogen lights and all that stuff from the houses in the background, and so black and white turned out by far to be the best choice for that photo, just because it was a, you know, kind of a crutch, I guess you could say. But I'm still really impressed. I was very impressed with the way that the XE3 shot. The battery life at 20 degrees Fahrenheit, taking shots for about 2 hours in 20-degree weather, with extensive image review and a lot of focus checking and a lot of on and off, back and forth, and very long exposures as well, 30 to 60 second exposures for the most part, because I shot almost everything at f8. So I felt like I pushed it a decent amount, and the batteries lasted really well. The batteries went for, you know, I only knocked off about 25%. I still had 75% left from the battery and the charge when I left there after you know, 2 hours of shooting long exposures in that cold weather. So I was very impressed, and the touchscreen functioned beautifully as well, and it was a good experience. And so far that's the only thing that I have printed from the XE3. And no, Christopher, the XE3 does not have built-in neutral density filter. The X100F does, as does the X100T, but I don't know of, I actually don't know of any interchangeable lens system camera that has a built-in ND filter on it, which would be awesome if they could do that, because like, I'm already pretty sold obviously on the XE3, which is the reason why I chose to get rid of the 100F, not because of any flaws in the X100F, but more because of the fact that I had to make a choice, because I couldn't afford to keep both, and the versatility and just there's a lot that I love about the XE3 that is really awesome, and if they put an ND filter on it, boy, it would just be, you know, over the top. And there's definitely things I don't like about the XE3 that I'm actually going to do a tough love review where I talk about the things I love and things that I hate, because it's really easy to get people to talk about the things they love about a camera. But a lot of times, you know, when you're a loyalist to a brand, or when you typically shoot one brand, it can be harder to be critical, and so I do that, you know. But yeah, if you're Christopher, what is your first body that you're shooting, if you don't mind my asking? Because I feel like the XE3 is a really nice complement. It's very simple, very well laid out. I mean, it's even a camera that, you know, you could reasonably give to somebody else if you're doing a shoot, like, you know, just for example, like wedding photography or family portraiture. Yeah, it's a greght complement to the XT2, and I've shot with the XT2 a bunch. But the XE3 is like a simpler, more streamlined touchscreen version of the XT2, without the flip screen and without the dual card slots and stuff like that. But it's what it lacks in those pro features, I feel like it certainly equals the XT2 in performance, at least in terms of like autofocus speed acquisition, and also the tracking with the autofocus is just really outstanding. And the ease of use and the cleanness of the layout too is really nice, because you don't have the D-pad, you don't have a lot of stuff. You can just kind of set it and give it to somebody, and they can take it and run around and take really nice pictures without having to worry about, you know, too much of hitting buttons or anything like that. It's there's just less there to hit, since your D-pad is all done through the focus, or through the swiping and the swiping gestures on the screen. So great camera there for as a second body for XT2. I would highly recommend it in my experience with both cameras. Next photo that I want to show you is not that piece of wax paper, but this is taken with the Lumix GH5. This is a little bit of Micro Four Thirds love there, and I shot this with the 12 to 35 millimeter lens. Again, a lot of people say the image quality off of the Panasonic, the Micro Four Thirds, that the image quality sucks, and that they're to this or not enough that, and that I don't, again, I don't have enough expertise to analyze this photo and say what's good or bad about it, but I can say that it's sharp and the stuff that I want in focus is in focus, and it captures the feel and the mood. And I'll explain a little bit about what this picture is of and what went into this picture, but it looks very pleasing to me. It makes me really happy. I love this photograph. And I took this, I believe this is an ISO 800 photograph with the GH5, and I'll bring it a little bit closer so you can get in there. And I don't know if this is considered pixel peeping or what we're peeping at exactly here, but there's not a shortage of detail on this photograph. So this is a photo that I made for my best friend Andrew, and I did a video where he visited me up here in Massachusetts about 6 months ago or so. I've known Andrew since I was in, oh boy, I was like 7 years old when we met. We were both kind of, we didn't have a lot of friends. I guess you could say some of that was because we lived in an area where there weren't a lot of people around, and we both went to schools where we didn't necessarily fit in we just didn't make a lot of friends with other people, and we were kind of odd ducks. Our parents met at church, and we wound up really hitting it off, becoming best buddies. We hung out every weekend. We talked so much on the phone that our parents were like, oh, you guys should get into ham radio, because our parents are old and they remembered ham radio, and they were like, yeah, ham radio is a thing. That'd be a great way to save on the phone bill. Like, let's get $700, $800 radios and take get your FCC license, then you can talk for free. Of course, this was before cell phones and all that stuff. So we were like 11 years old, and we learned Morse code, and we went out there, we got our licenses, mowed lawns, saved up, got ham radios, and we're like the weird 11-year-olds that knew Morse code, and we're talking to people all over the world on our ham radios. And ironically, because we lived so close to each other, the radio waves actually skipped over. So the way that high frequency radio propagation, like AM radio propagation, works, you bounce your signal off the ionosphere. So the ionosphere is a layer of particles that get charged up by solar radiation, that get ionized, and then your signal beams up, and then when it hits that ionization layer, it then recurves back down to the earth. So depending on where the ionosphere is, sometimes it's higher or lower depending on what time of day it is and how much ionization is in the atmosphere. The skip goes different ways, but there's always like a blank spot in between where you launch the signal from and where it recurves and touches back down. And Andrew and I lived really close to each other, so we would always like skip over our radio waves would always skip over each other. So anyways, Andrew is now, and this is ironically, this is taken in my room. He stopped over to visit me and my dad, and this is the floor where we spent many nights having sleepovers and discussing fishing and ham radio antennas and hunting, which is pretty much what we do now when he still comes over. We're doing all of the same stuff and dreaming about getting back into the hobbies that we kind of had to leave behind in order to do adult stuff, and kind of sharing that with my daughter and getting her into some of that, which has been really exciting, getting to play ham radio stuff with her and take her fishing and start when she's a little bit older. We'll work on hunting and shooting and stuff like that. A lot of the stuff that we did is out in the country is good, clean fun. And Andrew's an iron worker, and there's a certain your boots and your hands, kind of the things that you use to work when you do manual labor. It captures a certain essence of the spirit that you have to go out there and do hard labor like that. And my dad was an iron worker for 35 years or so, until he busted his back and had to retire early. So there's a little bit of that ironworking in the family. And my dad actually worked on the AT&T building in New York City, so he built skyscrapers. He also worked on the World Trade Center, the original World Trade Center. He was part of building that. So, you know, a little bit of family legacy there, and my best friend too, you know, being an iron worker. And so they always hit it off, which is kind of, frankly, it annoys the daylights out of me, because like my dad always wants, you know, rehash old war stories about, you know, being up in the skyscrapers, and I just want to like hang out with my buddy and talk about, you know, the price of Bitcoin. That's the new thing that Andrew and I are into. But anyways, that there's a lot of sentiment that goes into that photograph, and I'm actually giving him that photograph for Christmas, which he already knows. I already ruined the surprise, because I was so excited about how great that image from the GH5 was, and that image quality. I was like, I gotta tell somebody, and like, you know, I didn't want to wait to tell you guys, so I told him. And you know, so because he mentioned that, you know, he's like, yeah, you know, I like those pictures of old stuff like that. And I was thinking, what can I get Andrew for Christmas? I was like, yeah, that would be cool. I'll give him a photograph. And I'm gonna, I probably should have reflected this in the title, but the last 3 photographs that I want to show you are actually GH5 photographs. Maybe I shouldn't say that. I should pretend that that's not the case, so that way anybody who hates Micro Four Thirds won't be too butthurt about the fact that I'm wasting your time by showing you inferior photos that are taken with those cameras that we all love to hate. But this has stupid pieces of plastic on there to keep it safe. And again, I don't think I'm gonna frame these 10 by 15s, because I just like the look of them as just photographs, just big photographs. This is a photograph that I took of Martin. Again, you remember Martin, he's the fellow on the big print that I got done, that I have hanging behind me there with X100F. On this route that we climbed together when I was up there in British Columbia. Now, a little bit of history behind this route that we're on. I mentioned when I showed you the picture of Martin's dad. His dad used to be a climbing ranger. He worked search and rescue for Parks Canada. He was actually the head of the entire search and rescue operation for Parks Canada at one point. And so he put up a little practice route that he used to climb like after work with his buddies, like back in the 70s. And it was this little nondescript thing, nothing, you know, major. It didn't ever get repeated. It was all put up with pitons. So these all like hammered in spikes, basically, that you clip into for protection. And the rock quality is not great. And so when Martin and I were there after we did the, you know, we climbed some bigger stuff, where I took that photo of him that I've hanging behind me. I took that photo, and we were like, you know, it'd be kind of cool if we did something that had a little bit of sentimental value. And this photo has the coating on it, so it's a little bit stiffer and it's harder to hold. But I need to get an assistant. Once my AdSense revenue picks up a little bit, I'll be able to afford to get an assistant to hold these pictures for me, so that they don't attack me, and so that I can pontificate about them a little bit more easily. But in any case, so his dad had put this route up back in the 1970s, and you know, since he retired, nobody, and left there in the 70s, nobody had climbed these routes. So we were like, what a cool way for us to kind of pay a little homage to his dad. Then by going out there, we're going to find this route that he used to climb that nobody's been on in like 35 years, and we're going to go try to find it, and we're going to climb it. And it was a pretty short route. It was like 3 rope lengths, like about 500 feet or so, and it was super adventurous, and it was just a really awesome way to connect with Martin's past and his heritage climbing, kind of climbing this route that was put up by his dad before he was born, and that nobody had been on since, and like kind of linking our way from piton to piton. Like every hammered in spike we would have to find, and then try to figure out where the next one was. And the rock was loose and awful, and it was scary, you know. So it wasn't the hardest, most aesthetic climbing that we've ever done by any stretch, but it was really cool to be repeating something that his father pioneered 35 years ago, and to do that together. And of course his dad, you know, is 90 now, so he's like, you know, he hiked to the base of the route. And I want to show you that photograph, because I got a really awesome photo of them. And I you know, I did video. And this was the outing where I really made the determination that the GH5 would be my desert island camera, if I had to pick one to do both the video and the stills, it would have to be the GH5, because I switch back between photo and video, and I promise I am going to do the videos for this. I have to get those edited down. I need to stop being lazy. But his dad, Hans, hiked with us to the edge of the, to the start of the route, which was up a, you kind of had to do some climbing in order to get to the climbing. And I'll put this a little closer so you can see some of the detail here. But they were, sharing a nice laugh at the base of the route, and on the way to getting started. And so Hans hiked up with us to the start of the route, and then we climbed the actual technical portion where you need ropes. And it was like we were rediscovering the breadcrumbs that he put there 35 years ago. And then the awesome thing was being able to photograph the route and match up the photographs that we took with some of the old slide film that he had from when he was on that, and got published something in a magazine about it back in the 60s, the late 60s, early 70s. He published some stuff in a magazine, one of Canadian climbing magazines, and matching up our photos and kind of seeing, this was then, this is now type of thing. It was super, super cool. Being able to do that with, with these two is just a real privilege, honestly. Is being able to connect to something historical that may not mean a lot to a lot of people, I would say, because I think there's, certainly if you're not a climber, it may seem a little bit esoteric, but I think if whatever it is that you're into, whether it's music or photography or climbing or multiple things, I assume that most of us are into, we're all, I would think, multidisciplinary on some level, that when you get to connect with a hidden gem from the past, it's just super, super significant. And, my goal on that day was to make video, and I figured I would take pictures when I could, but it also kind of functioned as a really nice test for the GH5. And because the GH5 was so bloody burly, it was really, really, it fared really, really well for what I was doing there with the climbing. And it was kind of after that little excursion that I said the GH5 would be my desert island camera if I had to pick only one, because of the fact that it does the video so well. But the stills are, it's not a Fuji, and I'm not going to say I love the Fuji cameras. Fuji is like dessert for me. Like, if I can shoot Fuji, I will always shoot Fuji, because I just love shooting the Fuji. I love that experience. But if I need utility, and it's like I just need to be able to do as many different things at the best, midpoint of quality that's going to be appropriate for everything, it's really, really hard to deny the value of the Micro Four Thirds, because the video is so good on that. The last photo that I got printed, and then I will stop blathering about my photographs here, and I will enjoy interacting with you all here in the chat. The last one, this is my brother, and this is the logging, the bit of logging that I did with him, vlogging and logging down in Virginia in the Appalachian Mountains. And it was a really amazing time. It was right after I got the GH5. I had the opportunity. I only brought the GH5 down there because I was going to be working with him. I was driving a bulldozer, chainsaw, a little bit of chainsaw work. He was doing all the big stuff like the felling. I did a little bit of limbing, and I did a lot of dragging with the bulldozer and winching and stuff like that. That basically, obviously the low skill stuff where it was less of a risk of screwing things up or getting hurt, and that where I could still be useful. And so it was just the two of us logging this huge parcel of land down there, and it was a awesome chance to test out what the GH5 could do in terms of stills, in terms of video. But it was also, more importantly, a really good opportunity that I had, being I'm 7 years younger than my brother, and I've always looked up to him for a lot of things, because he really got me into the outdoors in different ways. He's never been into climbing, but he's always a hiker. and an outdoorsman, and now even working in logging and forestry as a master's in forestry from Virginia Tech. And he used to be pretty up there, a senior in state forestry in the state of Virginia. And then at one point he just decided to, he's done with the rat race, done sitting at a desk basically, and that he wanted to go out and just log. And so now he does that by himself, and sometimes with the helper on the weekends. So get one of his friends to come help him. And I was down there for a little while. He just kind of does his own thing, really small scale timber harvesting, and so does some what's the word? Arborist. He's a certified arborist as well, so he does some of that, does some consulting. And there's something which you may have noticed with my discussion of ironworking and my friend Andrew. There's a real appreciation that I have for people who are, people who work with their hands and do hard manual labor. I think there's something inherently beautiful about that and admirable. I also think that it's one of the things that I like to photograph more than anything else, because to me there's a special kind of beauty in that individualism and going out there and going and getting after it and waking up earlier and doing stuff that most people think is, most people think of logging as being a very big commercial operation where everybody's just plundering and pillaging and just running off with sacks of money and big pillowcases with dollar signs on it. And the truth is there's a lot of, there is some of that happens too, but there's also small scale timber harvesting. And yeah, thank you, Kit. I appreciate that. I was really trying to capture that, because it's not often that I find things that are geometric in my shooting, because a lot of times that's something I struggle with. There are some adventure, outdoor, wildlife, landscape photographers that do a really good job. They see shapes. I go out there and I just see nothing. I see blobs. And I'm like, ooh, pretty sunset, and then it's just a bunch of colors and there's no foreground, and I'm like, damn it, what was I thinking? So it's really cool when it's nice for me, I should say, when I have the opportunity to have very obvious lines in a photograph. But I appreciate that. That's also one of the reasons why I wanted to get that printed. So yeah, those are the photos that I printed for this photo challenge, and I'm probably going to make more prints, and I would love to see and hear about your process, and not even just the printing and the technical side of things, but also kind of, why do you pick this photograph? What is it that's significant about it? And I think that, and without trying to be too, over the top, warm and fuzzy and or preachy or anything like that, I think that there's, if you look at photos and you're only printing them because they are aesthetically pretty, I would like to push folks to photograph things that make them feel something, to where they could tell a story about their image, even if it's not something that's climbing a mountain. It doesn't have to be a big story. Like my buddies that I've known since I was a kid, his boots, there's a story there. It's something that means something to me, and that's what, why I went there. And I think a lot of times it can be hard to let go of the idea, or at least I'll speak for myself and say that for me it's been hard a lot of times to let go of the idea of shooting exotic things or things that are striking, in favor of shooting things that are subtle, more understated, but things that mean something to me. Because I'm always afraid that, well, if I shoot that, it's just going to be dumb, or it's a snapshot, or nobody's going to like it, or I'm not going to like it, and I'm going to feel like I'm, kind of, regressing in my work somehow. But I feel like I always find surprises of pictures that are much better than I could have taken, but the way they happen is better than I could have engineered, if that makes any sense. Like a lot of these pictures, there's a certain amount of love and care that comes through without you even knowing about it in your photographs, where and this might be counter to what everybody here believes, or maybe even some universal truth of photography, but I think that there's a certain level to where you have rules in your head at one point or another, but when you love somebody or something and you're excited about that person or that thing, you are unable to really be that analytical about it, and you're just excited and full of love, and that comes through somehow. And there are good things that happen, I don't want to say by mistake, but I also kind of by mistake, like good, happy mistake. Like, you know, that there's a certain element to which you relax, you like, you know, just relax into it, and that act of relaxing and being a little, and just letting the love flow through you, you know, as cheesy as that may sound, it actually winds up putting something into that image that isn't them, and it's not you, it's something that's between you, and you just kind of have to be able to get in that position where you both are feeling this thing and have that connection, and the camera is in the middle, and it creates something almost of its own accord that is bigger than both of you. I mean, I guess I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's my explanation for these pictures. I'm sticking to it. Kenyuzi, and I'm just reading off the screen here so I don't have to be poking around on the phone. Kenyuzi says, my selection process for the prints was to choose my favorites and narrow it down to a few that made me really happy to imagine framed and hanging on my wall. I totally get that. I gotta say, right now I do not have a lot of wall space anywhere to be hanging prints, but that's part of the reason why I got a whole bunch in the 10 by 15 size, which honestly, you know, those with the finishing I think were like $16.50. The ones without the finishing were like $14.50 a pop, which isn't super cheap, but at the same time, you know, I could afford to get a couple of those a month and feel really good about it. So yeah, if you got wall space, man, I'm somewhat envious of you, because right now I have, as you see, or maybe I try to hide it on these live streams, but I do you know, I do try to hide it on these streams, but I do not have a lot of, I don't have a lot of space to decorate at this point, because I'm kind of in between living, you know, my family here is with my mother-in-law, and then I'm with my dad while I'm going to nursing school, so things are, you know, a little touch and go there. Well, that's funny, Kit. I read your comment there before. Travel with Kit asking how I feel about, you know, putting stuff on my own wall and feeling narcissistic about it, or that some people might see it as narcissistic. That's funny, because that thought literally has never occurred to me that anybody would see it that way. You know, I think that to some extent, I mean, so narcissism is somewhat in the eye of the beholder, right? There are a lot of people that, well, I'll speak for myself, but I have seen other people too, who are very willing to denigrate other people for doing something, but who would do the same thing themselves, or because perhaps they know that, or they feel like somebody else, maybe when they were coming up or starting to learn photography, they were with somebody who talked a lot of crap about people who did that thing, that then they became afraid to do it. But in reality, they would actually kind of like to do that too. And I think that's why a lot of people hate on stuff. That's where haters come from. It's people who actually secretly want to do that thing, but they have to feel like, since they don't feel comfortable doing it, that if they can at least bag on other people who are doing that, that makes them feel like they have a position of higher authority. And I think we see this in a lot of different areas in photography, not just in printing. A lot of it's like on social media, right? A lot of people bag on social media, like, oh, if you share stuff on Instagram, you're not a real photographer, or you're just trying to get, you know, attention, and you're just narcissistic. And like, you can do that. Like, you can be narcissistic certainly through social media. I mean, oh, bugger. There we go again. For those of you who missed that happened in the first part of the live stream, where my picture attacked me, and it did that again. So yeah, if I am being narcissistic, let's just say that having my own picture attack me twice in the middle of this live stream, I feel like that should pay for it. That's a decent amount of humility that I think I just gained some humility points there. So yeah, not worried about it at all. But to give you a slightly more roundabout philosophical answer that doesn't involve my framed print attacking me in the head, No, I don't feel the least bit reticent about that, least bit self-conscious. It never even occurred to me. But now that you say it, I can see how some people would think that or would feel that way. But it's the same way where, like with Instagram, I've never felt like it was narcissistic to share my work on Instagram. It's like, this is literally what I'm doing with my life. Now, if I had a bunch of pictures of myself around my own house, that would feel weird. And I would look at that and say, okay, maybe a little much. But at the end of the day, I spend a whole bunch of money on cameras. I spend a lot of time. I spend so much of my life and my money. Yeah, no duck face. No duck face photos will be found on my wall. No mirror selfies on my walls. But the places that I've gone, the things that I have shot, the time and money that I mean, like, if I had a nickel, well, okay, I can't even begin to quantify it. Yeah, it's like we put a lot of ourselves, not just our time and money, but we put a lot of our feeling and our care and effort and our lives into making these photographs. I mean, who else's work would I want to stare out of my wall? Like, I want to see these, and I think a lot of it has to do with like how and why you make work too. I mean, I think there's some, somebody a little, I think Scott said a little bit further back up the chat that, if it's good photography and it's worthwhile, then it's all good. And I think there's a difference between somebody trying to be artsy and being like, oh, I'm going to take an out of focus bokeh shot of, this thing of, people basically making motel art with their cameras, versus somebody going out and making a photograph that's significant to them. But I think that ultimately my goal in photography is to make work that I feel good about and that makes me happy, which is exactly why I am not a professional photographer anymore, because I want my goal to be making myself happy and a handful of people whose opinions that I care about. And so as long as I don't feel like it's narcissistic when I look at it, like if I had any question about it for myself, I would, err on the side of caution. I wouldn't put anything on my walls that made me feel, I wouldn't put anything that made me feel funny. But the pictures I have printed, they all are very, very special things. And if not for the sake of being able to share this stuff, share it with other people, but also to surround ourselves by the things that we find beautiful, then I mean, what's the point of doing any of this? You're not curing cancer. I'm not curing cancer, but like or diabetes or whatever, like we're just people capturing moments and doing stuff, and who else is going to care about that if we don't at least care about it first? And so I think that when you're printing or when you're making work with the goal of hanging it on your own home, that puts you in a position to say, okay, like, is this good enough? You raise the bar a little bit. I mean, I can see how it could go the other way, and you could lower the bar because it's like you think all your stuff is so good, and so anything passes that cut, makes the cut of what is going to go on your hang on your walls. But I think it puts you in an interesting position. It puts you in an interesting position to be able to really appreciate your work and edit it a little bit differently, which is always good. It gives you a different angle on what you're doing. And yeah, Kit, I hear you about the time and the investment that you put into getting that picture of the fog, and how infuriating it can be when people invariably will not get that, when people are going to be like, oh, you're so lucky. I used to get that a lot when I was traveling. And on my Instagram, actually, if you go back, a couple of years or a year, even year and a half, when I was in the trailer, you'll see that theme repeated. Very well-meaning people, some of whom I even know a little bit, and I was just kind of like, really, you know me well enough to know that I'm living kind of a vagrant lifestyle with a 2-year-old. My family is struggling, 2-year-old at the time. Like, I'm broke. I'm scrambling to try to make money. I'm trying to do work that requires a house while living in a trailer. And yes, I do get to take a couple of really pretty pictures every now and then, but I'm really working much harder and enjoying my time much less when I was living in the road, living on a trailer, out of a trailer. And spending a lot of time traveling, we always get those same type of comments where, oh, you're so lucky, I wish I could do that. And it's like, well, I mean, if you're willing to, sleep on people's couches, if you're willing to be broke and have to say, well, this month I'm going to have to live off my credit card because I can't afford that. And if you're willing to have, 3 different mailing addresses, so you have car insurance in this state, medical insurance in that state, you have your, credit cards go to that address, and then you pay taxes over there. Like, and you're always having, because you're constantly on the road and you're trying to juggle everything. Well, there's a lot that goes into these different things that we pursue, whether it's photography or traveling or a combination of those things. And yeah, you're right. Like, people just do not get that, and it's so frustrating. But then some of us do get it, and then we can kind of commiserate and say, yeah, dude, I feel you. All those early mornings, late nights, and all that stuff like that. Yeah, that's true. There's a certain amount, King Yuzi, where you say that those comments are ignorant and just people that don't care. I generally, every now and then, I'll do like a missive where I will post something and just kind of address that sentiment in one fell swoop rather than replying to individual comments. Because at the end of the day, I also realize that there are a lot of people that look at some of my work that I've done and are like, people who, for whatever reason, either actually are unable or feel unable to go out and do that stuff for themselves. And so I want to give those people specifically an opportunity to live vicariously through my work, because at the end of the day, I don't really want to make my work for other photographers, because other photographers are the people who are going to be looking for reasons why your work isn't that good and why you don't deserve to have that many likes or followers. Other photographers are going to be the ones that are going to crop into like 1,000% so they can find oh, you have 3 pixels too many of noise in here, and it's just oh, there's a hot pixel over there, like this. I don't make my work for other photographers. I want to really make my work for other people who can't go to these places, can't experience these things. And then on a personal level, even more personal, like for my own family, for my own daughter, that she can have a record of the places that she's been and the experiences that we've had. And of course, so I and my wife can have that, and our family as kind of a legacy. Like, that's kind of why I do that. And so there's always that understanding that it's necessary to be showing your work to people who are ignorant, and not necessarily willfully. And some of them are just being flippant. There definitely are some people that are just glib, that are like, oh yeah, but there's also a lot of people, I think, that just legitimately have no frame of reference. And I find this on a lot of things, like, with diabetes, for example. A lot of people get really butthurt who have diabetes, when somebody makes a comment about diabetes that's ignorant. And for me, I'm like, well, obviously they're going to be ignorant. Like, how else would you know about something like that? I've been managing type 1 diabetes for 20 years almost, and it is as complex as can be. And so somebody who doesn't know anything about it other than seeing Wilford Brimley on Liberty Medical Supply commercials, yeah, they're diabetes guy, like cookies, Coke, that's all they're going to think of with diabetes. They don't know anything else. And, so I always get excited at an opportunity to educate people, when it is just that innocent ignorance, I guess you could say, because I look at that as something, because there are many things that I'm incredibly ignorant about. And the more you learn about the thing that you are into or that you're dealing with, the more you realize that level, those layers of the proverbial onion exist for literally everything out there, and that as a human being, you can only have knowledge of a very limited scope of things. And so you're always going to have blind spots. You're always going to be more ignorant than somebody, and you're always going to be putting your foot in your mouth about something. And so it makes it easier for you to be a little more tolerant, forgiving of other people when they do that to you. I mean, I think that's personally, and I'm not saying this to pat myself on the back, I'm just saying that honestly, I feel like if more people really adopted that mindset, there would be a lot fewer people. And I'm not saying this in relation specifically to you, kid. I'm not suggesting that you're butthurt about this at all. So please don't take, I'm not saying this part to you. I just mean in general. There are a lot of people these days who get off on being offended, and who think that being offended is an indication of some sort of malevolence or ill will or character flaw in another person that is unique to that person or to that group of people. And the reality is that we all are filled. I mean, we are mostly blind spots. Like, as human beings, we're more blind in our spots than not blind. And if we would just kind of move forward with that, with the understanding that it's like, okay, really what we're all doing is, it's like, you know, trying to, the blind leading the blind. And so instead of being like, yeah, I know where I'm going, like, you jerks, can't you hurry up, can't you figure it out, and then you shove the guy and then he stumbles into a ditch because, like, well, he's blind too. Like, there's that, we're all kind of in that same boat in one form or another. And so it always kind of makes me laugh how, like, some people get so worked up, about that stuff. um but yeah, and that's cool. Fabian or Fabian, I don't know how, and Ryan, good to see you here as well. Yeah, I agree. Empathy, I think, is although empathy is a tough word to use because empathy is sort of a buzzword. It kind of triggers a little bit of a kumbaya type of thing, and I don't. At least what I feel about this stuff is not like a warm fuzzy kumbaya. It's very practical. It's very cold, harsh reality that bears no coddling or no regard of victimhood, or it's just a very cold, harsh reality. Like, we're all stuck with a lack of perspective. That's just how it is. And that you're not special because you bumped into one person who has a blind spot that happened to hit you where it hurts, because literally everybody else in the world has or will or is doing that same thing. That's the human condition that we're all in. And, like, yeah. Well, I'm mostly German, actually, as well, on my dad's side, Fabian. So yeah, forget about the kumbaya. You guys do the efficiency and the cold, hard, factual stuff very well over there. So and also White Wall Labs, the company that printed my stuff, they are a German company. So thank you for whatever role by extension you may have in participating in that in their formation. But yeah, and I agree. Kit, where you're saying, remove yourself from that personal thing and try to, remove emotion. I think there's, I think that it's also good to have emotion too. And I don't want to, I mean, a lot of this is just me having fun with words and semantics and just being philosophical and kind of nitpicking because this is fun for me. This is what I like to do. I like to think and talk about stuff. I was a philosophy major. I like to write about stuff too, until, like, blogs went out of fashion. I think that it's important to disconnect. I think it's important to detach, but not disconnect, if that makes sense. And I think that this is something that I found a lot, even with photography, but I mean, just life in general, as a philosophy, as a code of livings, or a code of living. Because I like to think that I have a code by which I live, that I'm refining, and maybe that's a little bit self-aggrandizing, but I like to kind of think about these things. And I think that a lot of it for me that I've found that I live by boils down to detaching but not disconnecting, where we can take a break, and when we get emotional, or even to just kind of get a second opinion from ourselves about ourselves, where we detach, but without the point of completely separating and disconnecting and just being kind of this, disconnected, sort of third party that doesn't have any connection to everything else. And because I think that connection is really important. I think King Yuzi, use of what you just said there. You said, Yusuf said, I actually wish I got more emotional about things like this. I seem really unfazed by nearly everything. And, I think that has its place as well. I think that ultimately we have to find ways to push ourselves in a direction that is, it's like you got to stretch the muscles that are tight, and not all the same muscles are tight for the same people based on the things that they do, and we all have different weak spots. So it's like, for some people, being overly emotional is really easy. For some people, being more disconnected is easy. And you have to find ways to really connect and get, tap into that visceral feeling. And I don't really know I don't have a lot of suggestions or answers for that part of things, because I've always been somebody who is more connected than less connected. It's always been harder for me to detach And so that's sorry, my advice or my suggestions or philosophical constructs there are a little bit different. And also too, for a lot of it, I think that having a kid, having a child has helped me in a lot of ways to see that a little bit more. And also, and I don't, so I'm just going to throw this out there, Yusuf. I don't know much about you personally, but I think that just from a general standpoint, that one way that we can feel more is to embrace discomfort. So for all I know, you may get up at like 4:30 every morning and go outside and do like bare knuckle push-ups in the snow or something like that. But I know for me, a lot of forgive me if that's anything resembling the way that you live, and a very stoic Spartan way of living. But I think that for me and for a lot of us, we don't think or don't connect with things because we don't have to, and a lot of it is because, as much as we love technology, I love technology, it disconnects us from a lot of things in our life that would ordinarily require us to be deliberate and to act with intention. And we get to kind of circumvent that or cheat that process through technology. And that saves, that's the industrialization, the industrial revolution is kind of that idea, kind of really becoming mainstream, becoming popular, and benefiting people to the point where they just kept increasing that exponentially till now we're at a point where, I can have somebody come to my house with food that I want without having to leave having to get off my rear end. And I feel like the more we intentionally seek out experiences that push us, that challenge us, that deprive us, and it sounds a little bit sadistic, but I think that it's a developmental necessity. It's almost like, having it dark when we sleep. We don't want to live, the idea of living in a cold, dark world is like, that sounds really depressing, but at the end of the day, when you go to sleep at night, you need it to be a little bit on the cool side. You need it to be dark in order for your body to really recover and to rest. And there's that opposite part of what we pursue that's really necessary for us to actually take value out of that thing that we do. And I do the same thing, Yusuf. With for me, it's more checking Coinbase, and I've tried to limit myself more, and I think I've done a better job with that. Although I kind of have replaced certain social media activities with YouTube. And then, when I'm able, I take a break from that stuff to spend time with my family, which oftentimes leads into Netflix. And so it's always a concern for me where I feel like there's a lot that I can get that I don't have. And I just generally believe that being outside and being pushed and getting out of your comfort zone in the natural world, because it's harder to avoid it's harder to avoid the truth out there, and it's also harder to not appreciate things, because a dry pair of socks, oh my goodness, at the end of the day, when you've been out hiking and you like get into your tent, a flat piece of ground without any big rocks sticking in your back and a pair of dry socks to sleep in at night, it will change your life. I mean, if you're able, like a lot of people talk about, a lot of people hate on the idea of like bringing technology into the backcountry, like into the wilderness. But one of the things I always have liked doing is bringing my cell phone out there. I'm not going to get any service, so I can't connect. But like listening to a song when I'm out there, like 20 miles away from the nearest road, and just completely isolated, can't get a cell signal, nobody around me. And then just being able to listen to music and knowing that I have X amount of time until the battery goes out, so I can't just like let it play and just fall asleep with a podcast on and just be like, and wake up with, the frickin' earbuds wrapped strangling me in the morning and stuff like that. Reaching for the phone to check social media before I get out of bed. Like, I can't do that. And the whole experience becomes much, much richer, and I appreciate every little thing that I have around me a lot more. And, camping, hiking, backpacking, even traveling, I think contains some elements of that, but something that really forces you to connect by eliminating the out, because technology has become a refuge. It's an out that we have created for ourselves, and now to a fault where, you know, nobody wants to get in the game because everybody wants to sit on the bench and watch everybody else play the game. And so it's just like everybody sitting on the bench being like, hey, like, you know, good game, you know. That's one thing that I think I'm a big believer in, just the healing power. And that's one of the reasons why the name of my vlog back in the day was Adventure RX. It was the adventure prescription. It's like so much of what is ailing people in society could be solved on so many different levels, psychologically and physically and emotionally and socially and everything, just by like going out and spending a couple of weeks a year being deprived of comfort, technology, and convenience, and having to really understand the value of life. Is that, you know, when you come back and you're able to open up a carbonated beverage, like you would pay $30, $50 for that soda when you're in the middle of the backcountry and it's hot and mosquitoes are biting you, and then you come back out of that situation, you're just like, man, you just see everything differently, at least for a time. It's like going to a chiropractor and getting your, you know, bones cracked and everything realigned. It fixes stuff. It fixes stuff in your way of seeing the world, I think. And yeah, definitely, you know, visiting art galleries and seeing you know, beautiful work that other people make, I think that's a good way to do it. I have less experience, being honest, in visiting galleries and museums than I do in just wandering off in the woods for, you know, a few days at a time. You know, and I would say that there's the difference, or the thing where I would say is kind of a little more of a dividing line, is the physical element and the deprivation that goes along with being out in the wilderness, but in a very real way, not in an engineered way, or not where somebody is subjecting you to something, but just like, because I think a lot of the crises that we experience as a society now, a lot of it is just based on the fact that we just have, you know, way too much comfort, way too much convenience. Like, if people were chopping down firewood and hunting squirrels, you know, nobody would give a crap about 90% of the stuff that everybody has their panties in a wad about. Nobody would care, because everybody's busy trying to live, but everybody has the basic needs of their life met. So now what are they going to do with their free time? Well, oh, let me go check out what this guy's doing. And, oh yeah, well, you should really be doing that differently. I don't like the way you're doing that. And that's what starts to happen. But when you actually have that, you know, that veneer peeled away, and you really get back down to the bare bones of what life consists of, and how hard it really is when you're out there as an individual making it work, even if it's for a few days. Like, it's good medicine. It's really, really good. And it's hard. I mean, I like that stuff, but it's hard. And I mean, I like it. It doesn't have to be fun to be fun, let me put it that way. Yeah, Kit, that is a good challenge, and I will accept your challenge. I will do that. I will go to a museum, even at the risk of being too Ted Forbes. I will go to the museum and maybe take pictures and make a little vlog about it, and post it here at some point. I can't promise exactly when, but one of the things that is something I will do. And actually, maybe if I get a chance to travel this winter a little bit, I will do that. And possibly even if I go over to Dubai and I see you over there, maybe that's something. If there's galleries that you have in mind over there, that would be good. Yeah, can use these LV photo challenge. Put down the phone and go outside. I mean, that's why I started living vertical in the first place. It was to encourage people to go outside. Although, Kit, what you're saying about museums and galleries, and I will, who said that? Was that Fabian? Yeah, Fabian. Yeah, I will definitely take my daughter if I go to a gallery, or if I go outside for that matter, because she does pretty much it. She's so excited. We're going to go ice fishing this winter. We just got back from like a skiing and sledding trip up in New Hampshire. Didn't take any pictures, really. Didn't take any video. I just wanted to enjoy it. It was with my sister and her family, and I'd like never see them. So I was like, I'm just going to leave. I brought all my camera stuff, but I left it in the bag. But it was super fun. But yeah, maybe I'll see if I come over to Dubai, Kit, in a couple of weeks. I'll keep you posted. That'd be cool. We could go to a museum, and I'll definitely bring my daughter if it's possible, if it works out, because I know she would love that. One of the reasons why I've started with more photography books and all that is it's a good way to gain that, like you say, learn about composition and all that stuff too. So very cool. All right, gang. Well, it is approaching 80 minutes on this live stream, and you know, I've enjoyed talking to you all a little bit about various things here, as always, on the Adventure Photo Show. I'm going to give a quick little window if anybody has any questions or comments, things that they want to interject here before I kind of wrap this up. And then I'm going to kind of head for a close because I have a little bit of time now with my daughter in bed where I kind of want to go and, be a little bit lazy, go downstairs, eat some food, and watch Netflix with my wife and spend a little time with her, and eventually work on some YouTube editing. So Merry Christmas to you all. Fabian, Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. AJ, good to see you on here as well. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and anything in between. To all of you guys here, I really look forward. I hope that everybody just has a really awesome time and just enjoy the time that you have with family or whoever you're spending it with. And and I just want to say, if you don't have somebody to spend the holidays with, like, find somebody that looks like they need a hand, or that who's kind of down, like maybe somebody who has things a little bit worse than you, and try to spend some time with them. My last little philosophical rant for the evening, a couple years ago, when I was traveling, I was getting ready to drive from New York to San Diego, one of the many times that I did that, over the Christmas break. And my wife was already out there, and we were actually kind of fighting at the time. Things weren't really great. We were kind of having a little bit of a rough patch, and I was going to drive across the country by myself. I'm going to do a 3-day straight shot, New York to San Diego. I like doing that. I've done it many times, but I was feeling really bummed, and it was Christmas, and it was snowing, and my family was kind of all over the place, and I had to go to my wife out here, and all the people, my immediate family, everybody lived all over the place. You didn't have any childhood, all the traditions that we enjoyed in childhood were all gone, and my grandmother was in the hospital, and it was snowing. And of course, my dad was like, "Oh, you should just stay here. You shouldn't go. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that," giving me unsolicited advice. God bless him. He means well, but he always does that, all of his advice. And I was just really bummed, and it was Christmas Eve, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go see Grandma, because she's in the hospital, and nobody's in hospice care. She's on her last leg. Everybody knew that she wasn't going to make it much longer. That's what we thought. It was always one of these things. Every time we would leave to go on a big trip, it was like, oh, we better say goodbye to Grandma, because, she's not going to be around much longer. And every time, she would be like, you would leave, and she'd be 1 foot in the grave, 1 foot on the banana peel, and then you come back, and she'd be doing cartwheels and be fine again, and then the cycle would happen over and over again. But you never knew when the last time would be. So I went out there to the hospital, kind of on my way out of town, as I was getting ready to drive from New York to San Diego. I stopped in to visit her. Nobody else stopped in to visit her, and she's depressed and bummed out that she wasn't seeing anybody and all this other stuff. And one of the most memorable Christmases I've ever had. And she lived a few more years after that, but every single time without fail that I would see her, every time, no matter when it was, when I would talk to her, when I would see her, she would always bring that up. It meant so much to her that when she was bummed around the holidays and didn't have other people coming to see her, that I went to see her. And I went to see her because I was super bummed, and I didn't feel like I had anything else to do. And but trying to find somebody who's just a little bit more miserable than I was, and try to spend a little time with them and reach out and show that I cared, it was it paid huge dividends. That was one thing. When my grandmother passed away, after that, I was this time she was sick in the hospital. I left work, and I was racing across town to get to the hospital because I wanted to say goodbye to her before she passed. I walked in the room 10 seconds after she took her last breath, and I was bummed about it. I was sad, but there was also part of me where I was I knew that she loved me, and I knew that she knew how much I loved her because of that time that I went out to see her on Christmas when nobody else did, and how much that meant to her, and how we would always talk about that every other time I saw her after that. It was like I knew that she knew where I was coming from and where I was at. It was such a, I'm so glad. And it's like those little things, you never know. And so sometimes your own misery or despondence can be a really good springboard into something that could make a huge difference in your life or for somebody else. Kind of a long way to say that, but that's my little Christmas admonishment. So Merry Christmas to you guys. I hope you all have a wonderful time. Drop comments, subscribe, questions, any of that stuff. If you want to support the channel, of course, Amazon links are below each video. And that doesn't cost you anything extra, helps us out a little bit. And if you're interested in supporting the work directly, getting some of prints, not this exact print, but some of my printed work, which I print for my patrons, as well as the photo zine, the Adventure RX photo journal that I print and ship twice yearly to my patrons, patreon.com/livingvertical. And every little bit helps me make these videos and keep the studio upgraded, and